December 2022, less than 2 years after being exonerated in two different cases, Christopher Williams met an untimely and unfortunate death. After being framed for murders and being sentenced to a life sentence, Christopher Williams had no hope of living life. That was until he was found innocent for the murders of 6 people. Being wrongfully convicted in a crime is everyone's worst nightmare. What's even worse, that after spending 25 years locked up and alone, the world passes by with so many new ideas and technology, making it difficult for any person to reintegrate back into society. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bruh Issa Murder, where we cover true crime cases of color and play music from artists you probably never heard of. It's
Not the
me,
Quiet Storm.
Dirty B.
The B is for blogs.
No, the B is for butt stuff.
Yeah, the B is for bussy.
Dirty
Dirty bussy.
Dirty pussy. Because I don't wash my ass or my pants.
Going down in a Dia. Smell it from here.
Today, the gang and I are going to be taking a look into an exoneree who was murdered after being set free. Like always, before we start, make sure that you subscribe so you stay up to date on our latest episodes and extra content on our social media. Andre is always on top of his game, so he of course...
Did you edit it yourself?
Yeah.
No, he just wanted to go on the top.
Hey.
So of course he's going to
Get it right.
provide links in the show note. So Kelly, if you're ready, let's jump into this case.
Jump in
Okay.
with Corbin Blue.
Yeah,
Great
that's a
movie.
name I haven't heard in a while.
Great movie.
Perfect.
Multi.
Yeah, still fine too.
Christopher had been held in prison for almost 30 years for murders he did not commit. He was charged with 6 murders, acquitted of 2, and convicted of 4. He had been framed with 2 accomplices, one for the 2 separate cases by prosecutor David Desiderio in Philadelphia. 3 of the murders were of gang members from New York, 22-year-old Otis Reynolds, 19-year-old Gavin Anderson, and his brother, 17-year-old Kevin Anderson, of which he was accused with Theophilus Wilson. They were convicted on August 6th of 1993. Then, another murder of a 19-year-old man, Michael Hainsworth, who was killed after being shot while sitting in his car, with co-defendant Troy Colston, of which they were convicted in January 1992. These slayings were within months of each other, September and November, respectively, of 1989. And all of these convictions were hinged on the perjured testimony of James White, an informant who was incarcerated for murder. White had been promised a deal on his sentencing and was coached by prosecutor Desiderio. After decades of fighting, as well as spending 25 years on death row, Williams was exonerated in 2019. As well, there seems to be evidence that James White actually was the one who killed Michael Hainsworth, and he had admitted himself that he had been a part of it, but brought those 2 in with him, and then he was pressured to implicate Williams in the other murder of the 3 drug dealers from New York. So, and I just wanted to read this quote from deathpenaltyinfo.org because I have a lot of thoughts on it. Quote, Pamela Cummings, then the director of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Conviction Integrity Unit, called his wrongful conviction a, quote, perfect storm of injustice, which witnesses had lied, prosecutors had withheld exculpatory evidence, and presented false forensic testimony, and Williams had been provided ineffective representation. And the only reason I wanted to bring this up is because it's not a fucking perfect storm. This happens
I'm about to say.
all the fucking time. Like, this is everything. I mean, again, look, for instance, the stuff with Adnan Syed in Baltimore. It's the same shit. She acts like this is like a one in a lifetime thing, and it's not.
Is it the Brooklyn 5?
Central Park
guys?
5?
Central Park 5. Sorry. Yeah. Look at that. Was that also just a perfect storm? Like, this happens frequently.
Yeah, like they the reason it pisses me off is because it's like, yeah, well, witnesses lied, withheld exculpatory. They do that shit all the time. We know prosecutors will do anything to win, a lot of them. And then the ineffective representation, that's consistent across the board for everyone who gets a fucking public defender. Like, I mean, I know public defenders work hard and it's not their fault, but yeah, they're overworked. They can't provide effective defense for all these fucking people.
Only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah. Yep. So like, to act like this is a fucking anomaly, I think is so, I don't know. Yeah, inappropriate. Exactly. Yes, it's disingenuous. Yeah. So that's my little soapbox that I want.
Also, I want to say David Desiderio. How do you say? That's how you say it.
Yeah, I think so. Desiderio.
The perfect villain name too.
Yeah.
You hear that name, you're like, he's up to some shit.
But yeah, it's like the exact same formula for Adnan Syed's case. The exact
Sounds like a
same
Batman
shit.
villain. So now Christopher's newfound freedom was short-lived because less than 2 years after his exoneration, Christopher was shot dead at a funeral in North Philadelphia, December 17th of 22. So according to police, the shooting occurred around 12:30 p.m. outside of the Deliverance Evangelistic Church, where Christopher was attending a friend's funeral. Christopher was shot multiple times in the chest and was pronounced dead at the scene. The authorities are still investigating the murder, but some details have emerged in the media. Christopher's family members reported seeing a group of men arguing outside the church before the shooting occurred, but it's unclear if Christopher was like the intended target or if he was just caught in a crossfire. Because being from someone who lived in North Philly most of his life, shootings are not a uncommon thing. I remember being a kid and having my cousin from Ohio visit us, and we're sitting on my porch and we heard like some pops in the distance. So me knowing what was good, I got the fuck up and went inside. I look out behind me, he's still on the porch. I'm like, bitch, what are you doing? He was like, oh, I heard fireworks. No, you ain't. Some strays are gonna come down soon. You better get inside.
Well, the one wild thing when we heard about that shooting, and you said your ex-girlfriend had been right around the corner and walked through it after it happened. No, I mean, and that wasn't that long ago.
No, Philly be Phillying.
So ultimately, Christopher had been out of prison for 1 year and 8 months. In that time, he had begun working in construction and trying to reconnect with family. He had been gone for, 30 years almost. And he did have a son. In this time, Christopher also regularly returned to visit other inmates that he had previously been incarcerated with. And it became a dream of his to create his own construction company and be a place for people to go as they re-enter into society after being incarcerated, which we've talked about before is incredibly important. If you have a business in your community that is that, if there's anything you can do to patron them, that's awesome. There are, people who do get reformed by prison. They've, gone through the justice process and paid for their crimes, and re-entering them into society is what we should all be working towards. I think Dave's Killer Bread is also a company that prioritizes.
Yes.
But so his death has caused other exonerated people who are pursuing damages in Philadelphia to fear for their life. There's people who believe it may have been, an intentional murder to, kind of get him after he highlighted some conspiratorial things going on in Philadelphia. So the fact of the matter is that it often requires collaboration of many highly powerful people to actually frame someone for a crime. This isn't just, oh, we got some spare cases lying around, let's just pin them on this person. As Kelly was mentioning, it required like the collaboration of, an attorney, of someone who was already willing to testify and lie on the stand.
Especially when they're given a deal to do so.
That in itself is conspiracy. Like, I don't mean conspiracy as in like conspiracy theory, like a crazy thing, but no, a group of people conspiring to do something.
And withholding evidence.
So the case again, and I also have a quote that we're going to read real quick, and this was from the Inquirer. The case against the men was built on a house of cards. The case against the men was built on a house of cards, involving false jailhouse informant testimony, extensive undisclosed evidence, and forensic evidence that directly contradicted the informant's story. The basic structure underpinning the conviction was built on the unscrupulous behavior of several bad actors. So these conspiracies to pin crimes on someone else raises the question of who actually committed the crimes, because that's 6 murders that we don't know the answers still.
Yeah.
How did the exoneree come into the crosshairs of the people who chose to pin it on them, and how are they benefiting from protecting the real criminals? So was it truly just because the prosecutor wanted, like, you know, another gold star on their file? Or was someone paying them to do this? Are they somehow connected to the actual criminals? Are they covering up something for someone? Is organized crime infiltrated the legal system? Those are all things that should be investigated. And that's why the exonerees in the area are getting nervous of, hey, this isn't just another random murder. This was someone who was highly publicized, highlighting some bad shit going on in our community. And I'm also now pursuing damages against Philadelphia. Like, that would make me very nervous.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Who watches the watchers?
Yeah.
The people who serve justice, the prosecutors, the judges, the cops. Who makes sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing?
And that's crazy too, because it's such a tight-knit community, and there's, you know,
They're all scratching
airing
each
out
other's
the
back.
bad laundry of what happens or holding people accountable. I don't know how much that happens, and I don't think it's exclusive to just, you know, these different types of agencies. I think that is very
Something across the board.
Yeah, with any group of people, whether it be friends or family, or there's not a lot of accountability that happens, and I think it's because of the shame that comes along with it, or the not shame necessarily, but the humiliation, but then also the humiliation of being guilty by association, right? So
it's that, but I think it's also like they're almost kind of keeping each other accountable to cover each other's tracks, because if they don't, one group will fuck the other group. Like, I remember seeing a case where it was like, well, if the prosecution and the district attorney didn't cover the tracks of the cops weren't going to like give them evidence or like give them what they need. And so it's like this like horrific symbiotic like relationship as well.
It's like
that's why I have like no
ask for like professional courtesy and like don't get DUIs, or like a judge gets pulled over and he's like, you know who I am?
Yep.
And they're like, oh, sorry, your crime doesn't matter anymore because I need to stay in the judge's good graces. And that's how the prosecution feels about the judge, and like they're all just in that Ouroboros of corruption.
I also do want to add in that David's attorney's office in Philly is closed down. I just looked it up. He is no longer serving law in Philadelphia, or at least has an office to do so.
I know at some point he was fired from.
I wonder if he was disbarred.
Being a prosecutor.
I was looking it up. I couldn't see that. It just says that his office is closed and his LinkedIn has been inactive.
Well, I mean, you have to take into consideration all of the stuff that him specifically with these cases, that was in the 90s. So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
True. He could have done it. He could have passed away from old age.
I mean, he was fired as a prosecutor, but like we don't know what's happened in that span of time.
I hope he got his ass beat like at least one good time.
And that's the thing that pisses me off too, is that these people do horrific shit and like
never get beat up for it. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that they were saying too, the stigma of being like exonerated, where like it doesn't matter if you're exonerated, it doesn't matter if you're found guilty with like legitimate evidence, because the prosecutors refuse to like admit that they were wrong, because it's more important to them to keep that reputation. So they will still say that you're guilty, even if it's based on nothing, and that obviously puts you in a bad light in the public. People don't want to hire you, shit like that.
Well, yeah, totally innocent. I've been proven innocent in court, and you still don't want to hire me because I was a convict.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Damon Eccles has talked about that kind of shit too a lot.
What about that topic is like, how do you think the lack of compensation for wrongfully convicted people impacts their lives? Because when they get out, they can't get jobs. So it's like, bitch, at least you can come out your pocket for keeping them in jail for no fucking reason.
Especially if they've lost like their homes, all of their possessions, and all of that shit. I mean, he was in
years of their lives
in jail for 30 fucking years, just about. So
I should get like a year's worth of salary for every year I was in prison. Like, come out your bag.
I can't afford that.
Okay, they can't. The bitch,
they can buy fucking SWAT gear and tanks for each fucking police department, but they can't.
Well, and like Battle was saying, like, what was the technology difference between like this year and 1990? That person is walking out of a world where they previously were using like phones with lines connected to walls,
a beeper,
and now people are being like, dog, you got to get on Bumble,
He's like, what the fuck is OnlyFans?
Yeah, like, what do you mean? I can't just go in and ask for a job application? No, you gotta go to the web portal and you gotta fill out your job history for the past 10 years 3 times. That's what you're asking.
And a cover letter.
Well, and it's funny too, because you say that, like, my parents have been doing computer shit, term for it is, since the 80s. And my dad used to tell me, he's like, a computer used to be the size of a fucking room in the 80s. Like, and that's, that amount of like storage and like stuff is like less than what you can fit on here now.
Mhm.
It's wild.
So now, do you think like prosecutors and law enforcement officials have like a responsibility to address these convictions? Because they never do. Like when they get called out for wrong, no one ever comes forward and takes the L.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like who else has been I mean, not just the people who were wrongfully accused, but who else has been victimized by the people who actually fucking did the crime?
Yeah. Well, and I think part of this that we have to keep in mind is even if you are a quote-unquote good judge, your career is based on public opinion because you have to be elected to be a judge most places. So even if you were a good judge and you notice this happening, if your name gets associated with this media storm and you take responsibility and come forward and make sure all the right people, get their just desserts, then maybe you're never going to be a judge again. Because now the police union is going to be like, they did us dirty, no one vote for this judge, and you're like blackballed out of that career. So I don't say that as like a justification for why they don't come forward, but I think there is kind of a corrupt brain that you could say, it's better for me to be a good judge that says nothing and stays a judge than to be a good judge that comes forward and gets one cop off the street that is corrupt.
But how good of a judge are you if you're going along with all of these false accusations? Because, like, I mean,
it incentivizes
like,
people to not do the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that's what we say about, like, people standing up for, like, racist, like, white people saying stuff about racism. Like, if more people start doing it, then it becomes normal and then we can keep people accountable. But like it's getting to that, you have to get to that point where people hold each other accountable.
Normalize accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And last question.
All of us make mistakes in our jobs, whatever it may be. I'm very lucky that I've never made a mistake that caused someone to go to prison for 30 years. But in any career field, like learning from your mistakes and like benefiting from that is like well known. Like I would vote for a judge who came forward and said like, hey, I was a part of this case. Things did not go right. Let's correct this. Let's get this person out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is huge. That's so important to me.
And the last thing I wanted to say is, how do you think society can help reintegrate formerly incarcerated individuals? We talked about the pizza thing, but do you know any other avenues that you would want to shout out?
I mean,
I do have one. Wait, go ahead, Kelly. While I get my shirt.
Again, I think it says a lot about like the fact that our justice system in general and our prison industrial complex really isn't here for, what was the word? The R word that you used? Oh my God. Rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So like if we could start there, but even still, if people have gone through the prison system and they have been rehabilitated, that says a lot considering how all the factors working against them. But I think if like there's only so much society can do. We really need to start pushing and leaning on the government more to get their shit together, because like our prison system is destroying people. And it's the irony is that even people who are wrongfully convicted of something or end up in prison who maybe didn't do something that was really that bad, it turns them into fucking criminals.
Yeah,
because
go
that's
back to your lifestyle.
Yeah. So
one brand I do love is called For Everyone. They make a bunch of shirts like abolish prisons, but all their shirts and stuff like that are made from ex-cons themselves. There's a company started by ex-cons, and they make a lot of really good clothes. And I'll put the link in the show notes.
Not aware of any organizations specifically, but I think something that we as a society could be like prioritizing is education spending specifically for people who are ex-cons. So like getting you professional licenses or going to trade school or pursuing your degrees. Lots of people can do that in prison, but once you get out, it is much easier because you are no longer in that space to actually pursue education. So, if we have someone who's coming back to society and says like, hey, I have this interest, how do I go to school? If they're not making money, that's not going to happen. So that's an avenue I think could be interesting to explore. How do we get those people into the
cheaper or free education?
Well, here's the thing too. So like we already have this issue with our education system where we go to poor schools and depending on their test scores decide before they even get out of elementary school if they're going to end up in prison or not. What is it? The school to prison pipeline? So like we just have to restructure everything, but also like what if that was a thing that we did overall, where if anybody goes to jail, we specifically it's a requirement to have a certain amount of education that you accomplish while you're there.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, because like with what you're saying, like I get how it can be like in some ways easier to get an education after you leave, but you know, if you're in prison, you're not paying rent, you've got all this time to a certain extent to better yourself, so that when you actually come out and you do have all these responsibilities and you do have all these things that you need to pay for, you can just go immediately into the workforce.
Yeah, and make an actual income. Unlike in California, when they're sending those prisoners to be firefighters in that wildfire and paying them like pennies to fight a fire.
Such bullshit.
Well, I mean, the wrongful conviction of Christopher and his death really just shows the flaws in the justice system. And everyone sucks in the justice system because no one's doing anything to change it. But check out the links in the show notes, like For Everyone Collective. They have like a lot of really good clothes, and they're actually pretty cheap too. A bunch of sweaters and stuff like that. And it helps a good cause because they also raise awareness for a good cause. And that was the episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Check out the social medias, the Patreon, the music. I'm updating a Spotify playlist. I had a couple of people DM me about that. Was like, hey, you're missing a lot of songs. I was like, bitch, I'm just, I do it when I do it.
And thank you for the reminder.
Thank you for the reminder. Well, yeah. So enjoy the music. Anything else to plug other than your butt?
One other cool little thing that's happening in some prisons. They're using VR headsets to reintegrate or to train people on like, this is how you go into a bank now and use an automated teller machine and like things like that. Using VR headsets, which I think is kind of like a cool concept of, you know, putting someone in a safe way of reintegration. Yeah.
Future.
I don't know how widespread that is. I only found like 1 or 2 articles about it, so don't know how successful it is either.
White collar prisons. Like the one that Gwyneth Paltrow almost went to. Innocent, though, you know. Anyway, kisses from the homie.
I'm falling off over the edge, can't control my